Hi, I'm Hugh Weber, and I'm excited to welcome you to the Orpheum Theater here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. On March 26th, this will be the location for the first OTA Sessions, a session we're hosting to spotlight and showcase the talent, the innovation, the creativity, and the brilliance that exists in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. There is a lie pervasive in this country that the people that live in the upper Midwest are there because of some deficit or some lack of competence.
The OTA Sessions for me is an opportunity to set the record straight.
OTA began with a simple idea that the people of the states that end in OTA were worthy of celebration. And that if we could connect them, bring them together, celebrate them, and then cast them out into the world, extraordinary things could happen. Every year, as we get ready for the event, we would take out a home equity line to pay for that year's event, knowing that if people didn't show up, if things didn't go well, that we very well might lose our home. And we did that for 4 full years. We had decided to kind of wrap OTA up at that point. We simply had invested all we could when the Bush Foundation in St. Paul reached out and offered us over the course of 3 years $1.5 million to invest in events and communities and to build a true organization around the work that we had done. So we started programs like the OTA Builders and OTA Trailblazers, which were simply a way for us to encourage people to take a risk of their own and to do so for the betterment of themselves and for their communities.
This has been quite a week, and I mostly mean that self-centeredly about OTA, but quite a week about a whole host of things. It's a relief to be to this moment. It also is extremely exciting to be in this position. It shows that over the course of the last 8 years, 11 large-scale events, several dozen small-scale conversations, 35 micro-documentaries, a dozen graphic designers, a dozen photographers, incredible artists of all flavors, that we've done much of what we hope to do.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Thanks, OTA.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
I think the last couple months have been, for me, an important stage of hibernation. There are these parts in the creative process where you need to disappear for a while and you need to, struggle and be challenged. And the last couple months have been that. We're in the midst of this transition from what OTA was to what the future holds in so many different forms and formats. And a lot of the things that I've been doing for 20 years apply. I've seen stories that need to be told and finding kind of the diamonds in the rough. But then there's this whole other side to the work I'm doing in radio. And it has been the hardest thing. You get to a point where you feel like you've got things figured out, and then you get to start over again. And that's terrifying. And so that's where we are. You know, the hibernation process is over, and it's time to go out and reconnect and celebrate and be a catalyst for all those individuals that are important to me. I'm on the radio now and probably reaching a greater distance than I have for a while, and yet I'm seeing fewer people over this last month or two, and I'm ready for that to change.
I feel like this is like listening to the military service.
This is my dad's photograph book, and this is a picture of my dad, and he was having a hard year, he told me, and his teacher didn't believe in him. And then in this year, it was a different teacher, and it was his favorite teacher, and it was his favorite year, and he was 11 years old in 5th grade in 1988, apparently.
It's gonna be really cold going outside now.
I greet the winter kind of like a death in the family, and yet this winter it has to be different.
We're going to be out on the road for about a week, and we're going to have the chance to meet small-town economic development professionals, practicing artists, nonprofit executives, ordinary people that are just day by day making their communities extraordinary. And now we get to check in on them and see what they've been up to.
Camera and audio are rolling. Action.
I'm Hugh Weber. Welcome to the Potluck Society.
That's where my grandparents lived. That's where I spent much of my childhood. I was a Sixth Streeter, though, so it's got entirely different type of person that lives on Sixth Street.
And that was a playful jab at our friends, the filmmakers. But don't worry, they're Odins as well. Kylie grew up in Minneapolis, or as I like to call it, East Oda. And Christian grew up right here in Millbank on 5th Street. We met Bobby Bolin, the executive director for the Grant County Economic Development Corporation, under the old grist mill at the site of the chimeric stone.
This is one of those projects that Hugh got me into.
Bobby was my Sunday school teacher.
This is so cool. Hello, partner.
How are you? So what have you been hearing? What are people saying about the stone?
Lots of curiosity about what it says exactly.
Right.
Lots of curiosity about, because the letters are there and some of them are starting to come up, which they're supposed to. And so one of my dear friends was thinking that she should come out with some glue and glue them back down. And they're like, no, don't glue them back down. That's the idea, is that over time, they will come out of there. I knew that something good would come of it, but the whole concept was so faintly out there.
So if you took a great novel and you tore it page from page, and you put each of those pages in a different place and built a monument around them, that's what these chimeric stones are. Installations that represent a culture, a world that lives near ours or coexists with ours, but is completely fictional. It seemed like the absolute ideal thing to place in Millbank.
So now my bucket list includes visiting other chimera stones.
Right.
This is one of those things that I think it will gain in interest and value as the years go by.
I agree.
I moved to Millbank to work at the radio station, actually. I ended up doing an on-air job, too, where we talked about what was happening in Millbank. It was the morning show, so we talked for about an hour about local news and news events and whatever was going on in the regions. I would forget about the microphone, and so then I would overshare, so it seemed like everybody in town knew as much about what was going on in my life as I did about what was going on in Millbank. In 2004, my husband passed away, and it seemed like a good time for me to figure out what life might be like someplace else, to get a different perspective. So sold my house and I moved to Sioux Falls and had the opportunity to live in a loft there in downtown Sioux Falls, which I loved. It was a vibrant community and I learned a lot, but once my lease was up, I decided, well, this was crazy. It felt like it was a midlife crisis. And as much as I love Sioux Falls, I just didn't get that feeling of being in the right place. My official title is the Executive Director for the Grant County Development Corporation. Unofficially, I consider myself the biggest cheerleader for this region. I am the first woman to hold this title, and I'll be honest with you, when I applied for the job, I didn't think they would look at my resume. At that time, it was an all-male board, and my predecessor was a male, but I thought I'm going to give it a go. And I believe that everything I did before has led me to this.
A couple years ago, she invited me to come speak at the Economic Development Annual Banquet. I made a bold assertion that I had been given everything I needed to succeed by this community. The only thing I hadn't been given was a ticket home. That session was great. That evening was great. And Bobby called a couple days later and said, you know what, we wanted to make clear that we are inviting you to come back here and we expect you to be here a lot.
My whole goal was to shake things up a little bit. And I had been attending ODA. I heard Jason Roberts in Fargo speak about building a better block.
We did an event through ODA up here a year and a half ago.
I believe we had about 150 people sign up for that event. When I think back on that, that was definitely a turning point for us.
It resulted in a number of projects happening in town, a refurbishing of the ice skating rink. Was Tommy's Popcorn around when you were a kid? Probably not. No. Probably a little bit after you. That was part of what came out of the work too. They actually found the shed, which was being used for storage, and refurbed it. It's out here during the winter, and during the summers, it's in the park in town.
I credit Jason Roberts and Hugh with the coalescing of that whole idea of why can't we have our own art walk here? Let's give it a try. We have a store on Main Street called Whimsy on Main. All of those things came out of that association with ODA and with Hugh.
Bobby would be the first to say that it's a community approach, but I think she's humble to a fault sometimes.
You asked me one of the things I'm proudest of, it's probably the artwork that's displayed in the community, and I think that makes us more interesting as a community. It makes people stop and pause and say, oh, this is different. You don't see this everywhere. It gives us reason for conversation, and then it gives us reason to say, well, what else can we do?
It's a long drive from Millbank to Bismarck, North Dakota, but we broke it up with one of my favorite stops in Jamestown, home of the world's largest buffalo, Dakota Thunder.
Ridiculous, but it's this kind of thing that is exactly what it is about this region that I think I find most compelling, is that what on God's earth would compel a human being to like just look where we are. It's not like they carved a ridge out here. Like, we are literally on a cliff. And he's like, let's put a buffalo on it. I think this represents a repressed farmer. Like, this is a farmer who like had some secondary layer where he just wanted to build epic things. I am 100% confident when this was built by some man or some woman that they felt like this will draw people to Jamestown. Look at that. It's the Chamber of Commerce in the city. A city council wrote a check to Elmer Paul Peterson in the 50s to build the world's largest buffalo. Which is no different than Millbank writing a check to bring Jason Roberts to talk about building better blocks and refurbing ice rinks. Like, it's all that same balance of this need to create and be creative despite circumstances, but also on some level for the betterment of community, which I think is a pretty magical parallel. It's weird because I think this is what some folks in small towns grieve, is they grieve the fact that so many main streets had all of these things at one point in the not too distant past. You had everything you needed. You got a saloon on one end, and I'm sure there's a church somewhere here on the other end. And then as time kind of changed and people traveled further and the internet came about, I think that need to have everything changed. But that mindset of rural isolation didn't. And those communities that are thriving are those that see themselves as part of a connected, thriving network. Where you see those exceptions, I think, is where you've got young voices, whether they've left or and come back or never left at all, that really do recognize the world is bigger and more interconnected and more interdependent than I think it's probably ever been. And that you don't need the dentist, art gallery, and a food pantry all on Main Street in order to be a community that matters.
We're just pulling into Bismarck, North Dakota, the capital of the state of North Dakota and hometown of Amos and Carly Cobo. I'm a member of the Bismarck Chamber of Commerce.
Really?
Yep, if they decided to build the world's largest buffalo, I'd be part of it. We held an event here 2 years ago for the first time, and I came up to Bismarck to plan that event. We had a dinner, a group of young creatives around a table, probably 15 of us, and Amos and Carly were there, and we're a part of it and have been part of the family ever since.
When we meet people, when we travel, they're like, "You're from Bismarck? Why do you live there? I don't understand."
We love it, and we love the people that are here.
I think what makes the two of them special is that they could be doing their work anywhere.
I think that in smaller communities, you have a little bit of a chance to blaze a trail. That's so cute, you guys. Our main gig is wedding photography, so we love urban, modern weddings.
We love love.
We also have Co-Studio, which is a space for creatives here in Bismarck.
We don't need to show like spare bedrooms and stuff like that, right? That's just like, who cares?
All right. And this is the studio.
So this is Co-Studio.
Creatives can rent our studio by the hour.
For Bismarck, there's not a lot of creative spaces like that where they just open it up to the public and use it whatever you want. So for me being a photographer, a creative stylist, a designer, it was like, oh my gosh, there's this new space and I can use it for all my projects, especially in the winter. You know, that's a huge thing for photographers here. Like we get kind of stuck.
All of our goals have something to do with people. I would love to be a humanitarian photographer and just travel overseas and really just give light to all the things that are going on in the world right now.
I'd really like to help people where they're at, no matter where they're at. Everyone just wants to be known and to be loved, to be that person that they can come to and have real conversations and get past those hurdles to be the best that they can be.
It's great having him as a husband. It's like just having a live-in life coach. We've only ever pursued God and each other and good relationships, and everything else has just kind of followed.
We are working with South Dakota Public Broadcasting to transition ODA into a place where it will do events around the state of South Dakota, and that it will continue to build radio and podcast programming under the name the Potluck Society with South Dakota Public Radio. But on Friday, I get this incredible opportunity. They just asked if I would partake in this process leading into the inauguration, and will you find some people willing to talk to you about what they'd like the president-elect, the new president, new administration to know about your community, which I was really excited about because it's all the same thing, right? Like what we want people to know about Bismarck as a community of creatives and entrepreneurs is the same question as what we would like the president to know as well. But I jumped into it kind of over the weekend and nobody wanted to talk about it. I take that back. Everyone wanted to talk about it. No one wanted to be recorded.
Test.
Let's see how this works. Talk to me a little bit.
Let's see how this works. It's
gonna pick up a lot
more. 1, 2, 3, testing.
Hello.
Pick up a
Doing
lot more
of
of the
testing.
room, but that's pretty good.
Hi.
I don't deal in politics in this new phase, which is kind of fantastic.
Yeah.
But one of the things I'm doing a story on this week is actually just in general with the coming of a new administration. What would you like them to know about your community?
I did the last interview at 9:30 on Tuesday morning, and we were on the air in a parking lot at the state capitol of North Dakota Tuesday at 11.
Here we go.
Welcome to In the Moment. I'm Lori Walsh. What do you want the new president to know about you or your community as he takes office? And we start out that conversation with SDPB contributor and host of the Potluck Society podcast, Hugh Weber, who is joining us via phone from Bismarck, North Dakota. Hugh, welcome back to In the Moment.
Hey, thanks, Lori. It's great to be with you again. Happy Tuesday.
The last clip we're gonna visit is a husband and wife as well. They're here in Bismarck, North Dakota. They see themselves as non-political people, but certainly see being patriotic and engaged as a citizen is a core part of their identity. So we're going to visit Amos and Carly from Bismarck, and Amos begins as well right after the clip, so he's going to jump right into it.
That I feel like the American dream is still very strong in everyone. So I would hope and pray that any administration that is in control of those things would help and support us in any way possible so that we can be the best that we can be to serve our country, our friends, our communities.
Now, I want to be clear because I think that the clip in without context may make it seem like Carly and Amos are a little Pollyanna-ish, right? And I don't think that's what it is. I think what they're telling us is that when it comes to getting through a long, cold winter in Bismarck, you better be able to rely on your friends and neighbors regardless of what their policies are. I came from a background in political work and actually worked on an inauguration in the past. And I would leave Washington, D.C. to fly to a state to work. And I would have the TV on as I'm preparing there, and I'd hear how divided this country was. And then I would get to Madison, Wisconsin, or Des Moines, Iowa, or Tallahassee, Florida. And I would see people just working really, really hard to get through the day and wanting to make things a little bit better for their friends and loved ones and wanting to be good citizens. And I think that's what we're hearing from the people we heard from today.
Can I tell you one story?
Yeah, please.
Trump came to Bismarck, and we were out of town, so we didn't get to see all the mayhem. But one of my friends snapped me a photo of a guy on the side of the road holding a sign that said, "Trump hates Nefla," which is just, I mean, Nefla soup is like a staple here. So if you want to make people hate Trump, it's like, just tell people that he hates the soup that we love. He was standing on the side of the road with a sign in Bismarck. That doesn't really happen here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's passionate about his dumplings in soup, so.
Finding people that clearly, if we scratch a couple layers deep, to recognize that people are nuanced and layered and not the flat version of themselves. That's something I've been doing my whole life. The technical side is the most challenging, humbling, and I'll say, like, at times over the last 2 months, humiliating thing I've ever been through.
I took 2-3 weeks, the first thing I was doing. I'd heard it in those segments, and I was all very excited. I even poured a drink. And I'm listening, I'm like, holy crap, this is really bad. I'm so bad at this.
To be in this place and to know what these stories are and to know what they sound like when the medium gets out of the way of the story being told and not being able to do it is a super challenging thing.
Grandfather was teaching his grandson about life, and he told him the story of the two wolves. He said, "Grandson, each of us has two wolves inside of us. There's a dark and angry wolf that wants to snap at people and hurt people, and there's a light and happy wolf that takes care of others and provides leadership for the pack. Your life is going to be full of these two wolves fighting each other, and one will eventually win." The grandson asked his grandfather, "Which one will win?" And the grandfather said, "The one you feed." And what we have to do every day as human beings, is to resist that dark wolf that lives in each of us, and to reach out, call out to that higher part of ourselves, and that's what building community is about.
Cheryl Carey was part of the ODA Builders program and spoke at the ODA Bismarck event.
The Sacred Pipe Resource Center is a nonprofit here in Bismarck. Our major goal is creating civic and community engagement with the Native American community. Historically, the pipe has been the way to do outreach. So if we're strangers and I don't know who you are, I would typically smoke a pipe with you. By smoking together, we consensually agree that we're going to respect each other and tell the truth and speak in a good way to each other. I wanted an organization that was willing to be that outreach.
We met Cheryl at the North Dakota Heritage Center, which she remembered visiting as a kid.
It really was only like 2 or 3 floors of this building, and there was just big square rooms with like bugs pinned down. And it was just so little, and there wasn't much to it, but I always thought it was so fascinating. And then to recall that, little bitty room with just a few things in it, and then to this place, it's kind of symbolic of maybe of how our community has grown. I think we've been able to recognize how fortunate we are to have all this history and this unique history and everything. I think sometimes because we're so grassroots or whatever, we think, oh, everybody knows that. And they don't, they don't know a lot of this history and stuff. So it's kind of nice to see it given its due. I grew up on a ranch outside of Solon on the Standing Rock Indian Reservation. I spent a lot of time outside alone, out in the country. And that's where I go back to ground myself a lot. I grew up in a cultural environment as a Native person. So when I came up here, I had this experience of culture shock. I couldn't fit in because I'm so light-skinned. People would assume I was non-Native, and so they would just really say really racist things in front of me. At that time, I was so introverted, like I couldn't speak out. In my mind, I would be fuming, but then I'd also be like, well, yeah, why is that? Why is there such poverty? And I'd go to find the answers. My life's work has really been about getting people to understand each other, to work together, and that's probably why. This last year, we had the big national pipeline protest issue, and that's had a tremendous, tremendous impact on this community, and, forced us to take 10 steps backwards in terms of race relations and, how we interact with each other, and law enforcement issues and values conflicts and, all of these things. And so I'm probably one of the few people who believes that this whole pipeline issue could have been avoided had we had better relations in the first place. Had we had people aware of the values conflicts that occurred and that were happening, the communications breakdowns that were happening, the work that we do will hopefully circumvent those types of things in the future. That's kind of my dream. I think it's important now more than ever to be active, and I think people are seeing that we really are revving up again to recognize community and being active in your community and being good neighbors and good relatives. I think that whole philosophy is sort of coming back around, because I think we did lose it for a lot of years, where people were caught up in material things and technology and all that, and that has its place. But I think we're coming around to now saying, okay, it's got to be about people. That's what makes it fun and exciting, and you'll never run out of things to do because you're always working with human beings and the foibles of, being human.
It makes a ton of sense when you see these sculptures and the public art and engagement art and creativity in metro areas, even in mid-sized towns, even in places like Jamestown with the giant buffalo. But we are 20 minutes south of the interstate. We are headed towards Regents, which is somewhere out there, a super small town. And a guy came up with this idea for the Enchanted Highway, which you may not recognize it from its outward appearance, but we're on the Enchanted Highway. These sculptures are about every 5 miles apart, and they are extraordinary. It looks like this one's called Fisherman's Dream, and you see we're just down the road, we were at Grasshoppers in the Field, and before that, the Flying Geese. And you've got this sense that A, there's something really genuinely important about it as a folk art piece, but it's also community development and economic development. It's also this love letter to his town that he would build these things over a period of years, and he would commit so deeply to concept that he would take a stretch of 25 miles of highway and make it an art gallery. That's the kind of courage, seems like the wrong word, but that's the kind of courage that I can celebrate. I can stand out in the middle of a North Dakota winter and appreciate not only the art for its own sake, but for what it says about this guy in this region and this community. And then I can get back into the car and get the feeling back in my ears and hands.
filming your beautiful town.
The community decided a number of years ago to really leverage the president's presence in the region. And so each corner has a different US president and they're all represented. I'm not certain that Barack Obama is up yet, but I know that George W. Bush is. Did I ever tell you the story about Emerson? She was obsessed just with the words James K. Polk as a kid, and she would often like pack up her clothes and say she was going to his wedding. So here's Art Alley. We'll go down there a little later. And this is where Tyler Reed spends his days, some of his nights.
Tyler Reed is a graffiti artist, a community builder, an art educator. He's a hard guy to track down, but was an important part of the ODA Builders program.
He's actually in the basement.
Oh.
So he's on the other side.
Okay.
So if you guys go out to the Kansas City Street entrance.
Okay.
Go ahead, go down the stairs.
Man, he really is in the bunker.
We're actually applying for a grant for beautification of stairways to promote people to use stairs more. There's actually a grant for that, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There you go.
Thank you so much. Hey there. It's going well. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Is Tyler around?
Just go that way. He might.
Hey, I was trying to call you.
You guys beat me.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a fun space. I didn't set the mood lighting yet. I didn't turn on all my.
Being able to get our screen printing department started, you know, that was something that was always a dream, something that I talked about a lot and had always intended to do, but couldn't find the resources. You know, it was always almost there, but it was never there. And then when Hugh said, okay, you know, well, what do you want to do? I want to do this. There's the resource, and then we ran with it.
Creatives in this region are either afraid or resistant or anxious or don't have the resources to jump, or they're mid-flight and have no idea if they're going to make it across and how it'll feel to land. And so the ODA Builders program and the ODA Trailblazers program, which came kind of closely followed, were our attempt to get money in the hands of people that we felt needed to jump or needed to land.
So right now, you know, we've been working mostly with one color prints to get started. It's a very modest start, but it's everything we need, and we're starting to see the effects, you know. Artists like Connor have created fantastic prints, and, you know, being able to show people that craft, that art form.
Looks nice and black though.
Toss another one in there. We'll do like 10.
I just like the entire process, man. It's got that mysterious vibe to it. You know, you're like playing with emulsion in the dark and stuff.
These people were extraordinary, and in some ways all they needed was either a little bit of cash, or they just needed the validation that comes with someone raising their hand and saying, these 26 people are doing something that matters. Help support these 26 people. Have you felt like the support for this stuff has stayed solid?
It's needed in the community, you know. You look around at Rapid City, and we have a very well-established, very formal arts thing going on here with the presidents on every corner and things like that. And the weird thing about that is, as fantastic as it is, and how much, you know, tourists really are drawn to that kind of thing, it almost sometimes, I think, sets a barrier between locals feeling like art's for them, because it's so formal. This is all historic people and, you know, on a monumental scale. Mount Rushmore, for example. So there was a big to-do about this last winter. A group decided, they would scarf the presidents and then and hat the presidents, and then people could come and get them if in need. And then the city started removing them.
Oh, really?
And then the mayor actually said, leave them on, it's fine. And so here it is. I started out with graffiti. I think I was an 8th grader. I had, always seen graffiti and it didn't really click. And then there was an article in the Seattle Times about the secret life of graffiti artists. I must have read that article like 200 times. I became obsessed. And that's when it clicked. It's always got this balance of trying to find the structure, the solid structure and the architecture that you can build off of that letter, and then the flow and the beauty of it in there as well. From there, I got in a bunch of trouble, and I was told by my high school principal that I need to take an actual art course to learn what art really was. So I did. I kind of excelled at it, and my art teacher my senior year said, hey, you should apply for art school. And I said, I can't. I have a ton of community service hours left over from graffiti that I need to do before I turn 18, or every hour becomes an hour in jail. So he said, well, you can do your community service here at the school, right? And I said, yeah. And so he said, well, you come in, you build a portfolio, and you apply for Cornish College of the Arts. And for every hour you spend doing that, we'll sign off for community service. So I applied and I put together a portfolio and everything, and I got accepted. I met a girl online, and we ended up getting married, and 17 years later, we're living here in Rapid, where she grew up. She has roots here. She's actually Lakota. She's Crow Creek Sioux. So one of the other things that's really important to me is having my daughters have that connection to their culture that I don't think they would have otherwise. And there's some things, here in Rapid that we really struggle with. I don't want them to experience some of the bad things that come with the cultural tensions that exist here. But at the same time, I want them to know who they are. When we first heard that some of the water protectors had faced attack dogs, that really spurred something in me. It made me really angry. I got the thought on the way home to take the next day off as a mental health day. And I started at about noon, and I finished at about 2 in the morning and knocked this out. I've always been interested in how I can communicate with people without being front and center. I think that's what art provides for me. Our Rapid City Journal, they listed the mural as a good thing. They said, even if you don't like it, this is expression that starts dialogue, and we're fully in support of that. That's what Art Alley was intended for. And I was like, wow. The Rapid City Arts Council saying, you have the potential to do some really great things. Why don't you come work with us? First, I was on their Emerging Artists Committee, and then they let me do a show, and then I got to teach a kids' art camp. That was a game changer. That's like, wow, these people value that voice that I have. So now I need to use it to put value back in them and, repay that debt. Here we've got a mural the local high school is working on, Central High School. That's the kind of thing that we want to see and at least preserve for a certain amount of time so that it can be enjoyed. A certain amount of time that doesn't entail like 3 hours, which used to be kind of the norm.
Is there an element of speed to the process, like this slowing it down and change it?
It changes it in so many different ways. I mean, it changes the visual of the art itself. It changes the community that it exists in. Artists here almost overwhelmingly all get along. When somebody goes to paint, everybody comes out and they want to paint. That's the beauty of it, It morphs the goal to just simply get up in as many spots as you can so that you exist, versus putting all your effort into creating something that expresses yourself so well that people are drawn to that. That's why, I so believe that more communities, big and small as Rapid even, or smaller, need spaces like this, public art spaces that people can get involved in.
When the world was deciding its order, all the animals came together because the Great Spirit called them and said, we're going to have a race to decide the caretaker of Earth. And of course, the bison was going to win because it was the biggest and the strongest animal. But the magpie had been riding on the back of the bison, and the bison allowed the magpie to fly ahead and win. And then the magpie gave the responsibility to humans to be the caretakers of the earth. We hope to be that little bird that was so resourceful.
So Peter applied to be an ODA trailblazer, which was our micro fellowship. He was crystal clear from the beginning that it was a package deal, even though he was the trailblazer, that he and Mary were one and the same. And so we had the opportunity to help provide some funds that went into a scholarship for artists in this part of the region. He was a part of our event out here in Rapid City. And now we get to see the fruits of the scholarship work that he's doing, which is super exciting. How long have you been in the space, Peter?
We took over the lease January 1st, 2016, so just a year now. But yeah, here you're standing in the Contemporary Native Gallery. This is one of the reasons we created the space. There isn't a consistent place in Rapid City or in the region that's about that. So it's really a nice raw space that Mary can push the artists and pull the artists and really encourage them to create some cool things that we just haven't seen in the area before.
For myself, growing up on Pine Ridge, Rapid City hasn't always been the most welcoming place to me and my family and my community as a Native person. It's hard to love a place so much that doesn't love you back. We have a son who's 19, who's in his second year of college. And then we have Nupa, who is 7. In Rapid City, South Dakota, I would like them to feel safe and welcomed in a place that historically belonged to their ancestors. And I think art is the place where those hard conversations can happen and where those things can change. I think our very initial plan was just for a gallery, but it has grown to so much more.
And then again, the studios start here. We have Bad Art Press in this front studio. 3 gentlemen sharing this studio. We got Rick and Ryan and Stan.
There's over 3,000 flakes removed from that. This is Georgetown chert. I'm thinning it out, getting those edges so they're symmetrical. And eventually it's going to be an arrowhead.
Our people used to use the buffalo for everything, so we figured start using it again. Be contemporary, make art, using the things that are there instead of just letting them go to waste. And it's fun.
And then we've got Dwayne Wilcox, Lakota artist, Ray Tisdale, wildlife photographer, and he does some really cool abstract work.
Yeah, people ask me that all the time, what's your favorite? And it's usually the one I just got done working on. I've made the switch to digital in the last 10 years. Packed up all of my darkroom stuff and donated it to the photo program over at Black Hills State University. Gave them enough stuff, they gave me a plaque. I should hang it up.
We've got 4 more artists. Ann Horst does beveled glass. She works in the dental lab as her day job, and then she carries those skills over to work with glass and create jewelry. Anna Robinson does everything from photography to sound recording. She's a musician.
I have a new project in mind that I'm just going to try on my own just because I've been around so many painters and like visual artists.
Lucy's back here hiding. She's the scrap iron letterpress.
Hi, Lucy. You're living every dream I have, Lucy. Just know that, like, letterpress, right?
Do you mind if we come in, Lucy?
No, that's for my dog. Yeah, there's a puppy running around. He just...
I was here right after Lucy moved in. We were here one
that's right.
visit.
Okay.
The very first visit, it was completely empty back here.
Peter and Mary have been fantastic. It's nice working with like-minded people, you know, who are community-oriented and think about the arts as a tool to gather people and for community activism.
That first 5 years, it was really disheartening to see what was going on in Rapid City or what wasn't. But I'd say the last 5, there's been a slow transition to be more inclusive of Native people and Native art and actually doing some fun things that are outside of just the presidents or the corporate kind of art stuff that you find. It's really more about how do you engage the entire community and things. So it's coming. Still a big attitude change that has to happen, but hopefully this is part of that change.
Have we seen historically an increase in native art as an expression in like the 70s with AIM and now with Dapple?
I think movements like No Dapple just bring it to light for mainstream media.
There's protest art every day about cultural issues, social issues.
But being a Lakota person or a native person is political.
Right.
Going to school, getting an education, living off of the reservation, those are all forms of resistance and forms of protest to the United States government. And I don't think people realize that. Art plays a big role for Native people because there's such this mystical, romanticized view, the long hair, feathers, and sunsets, and people just only see Native people as, which is hard because then when you have real issues like they're closing all the emergency rooms on our reservations, it doesn't sound like a real issue to people, and it's hard to get people behind us, you know. And I think they did a good job at Standing Rock, but at the same time, you know, the people from Standing Rock talk about the camp, the Ocheki Shakui camp, ending up being like 80% non-native people, you know, and kind of coming in and inserting themselves kind of in a settler colonialistic style and not letting native people be the lead, you know. As a Lakota person, we were taught that it's never about you, you know. Whatever you're doing is about the people around you and the people to come. And they talk about the 7 generations, and that's how you're supposed to think and do, is to think 7 generations from you. The earth that we're on and the space that we're maintaining right now, we're maintaining for those 7 generations. Everything that I've done in my career has been thinking about the future and how do we make it a better place. Not just for my sons, but for their children and their children's children and so on, because we want this place to still be here.
Altman Studeni, another Oda builder, is an artist and city councilman living in Plankington, South Dakota.
I grew up here in Plankington. I was born in a blizzard on April 14th, 1986 at the Weston Springs Community Hospital. And the night that I was born, my grandparents' house got struck by lightning, and the electrical charge went through the wires of the television and exploded the screen. And a few days later, I was here in Plankington.
Well, this day kind of dispels a certain myth that it's always sunny in Plankington.
I don't know.
Isn't
I've
that
never
a myth?
heard that myth. I've never heard that myth.
But your family's been from this area for...
Yeah, for kind of the bulk of Plankington time.
But tell me about the Grain Palace and tell me about...
Yeah, the first grain palace in the country was in Sioux City. And I think that was like 1880 something, late 80s. The Sioux City Grain Palace ran for a few years and had a model where it kept getting bigger every year. Like the first year was a city block, and then by the end of it, it was big enough to have a trolley line that ran through the middle of it. Plankington in 1891, a group of business people decided that they wanted to follow the model of Sioux City and introduce a grain palace to Plankington as well. It ran from 1891 to 1892, and then the second year it went bankrupt. But Plankington wasn't the only one, obviously. You know, Mitchell's took hold the year after Plankington's closed. There were grain palaces in Gregory, there were grain palaces around Aberdeen. Because there was less structure, there was just more opportunity to try anything out. Like, maybe this thing will work, and maybe this thing will work. So often those things are couched in like an economic development perspective, right? Like Enchanted Highway exists because the creator of the Enchanted Highway wants to draw people to his town. But I think that there's something else that's motivating it, right? It's still the same motivating factor that like would motivate an artist to make the thing that they're making, that they just want to see this object made real, see something existing where there wasn't a thing before, or the process of converting materials into something else, right? Like Wayne Porter, who has the Porter Sculpture Park outside Montrose, he's just fascinated with metal. And like to take a little tour with him around that park, I mean, he's talking about all of the pieces that went into making those objects, right? The bull's head is made from the steel tiles that join railroad ties. That attitude towards making and the attitude towards wanting these things to be real, I think, is maybe within everybody. And the excuse to do it is put in these like economic development terms. There's lots of things that this was supposed to be. Like, you know, like I said, like a new neighborhood development was supposed to be over in that area there. That's like Delavan Street here. And then it was supposed to be a football field. Now it's just farmland. It's just been purchased to hay at some point. And, you know, for, 125-ish years, it's been pretty much like this, pretty much unchanged. It's waiting for something, or just existing as the suggestion that something could be here. So it is there's like a snake hibernaculum here. Like in the springtime, it just crawls with garter snakes. Hawk flying over too. I work with the South Dakota Arts Council and do residencies across the state with schools and community organizations, developing projects for site-specific work or work that's been generated through some amount of research into local history or some event that's happening in a community. I just got back from a residency in Sisseton, and I'm getting ready for a residency in Chamberlain. And so, one thing kind of feeds into the next. Beyond that, there is maybe somebody has called and wanted to commission a set of paintings of Jell-O. I mean, this is a whole can of worms. So we're getting into Jell-O now. I was thinking a lot about other practices that could be seen as an art project had they been taking place in a space where we kind of think art is made. Being in Maine, I became conscious that there was not Jell-O in Maine. Like you wouldn't run into Jell-O at a cafe the way that you would run into Jell-O at a cafe here. And then it kind of made me realize that this is one of the last places where unironic consumption of Jell-O is acceptable, is understood, right? So I started to think about Jell-O a little bit. And the process for making a Jell-O salad, where one band has celery in it, and the next band has carrots, and the top band has cabbage. In order for those layers to set without blending, and those layers to set without separating, you have to be there and be very present at the right time. And it's a very active practice. So what is the lady in her kitchen? What's like someone's grandma in her kitchen doing that is different than what an artist in the studio is doing? In all real ways, nothing. There's nothing different between that. Like she's using materials, she's using an aesthetic consideration, and it's even better than a painting. You get to eat that at the end. Do you like Jell-O? Yeah, I've even grown to like the hammy ones. I used to spend summers down at the newspaper kind of paging through old stacks of papers. And I mean, it just felt kind of important that somebody wrote those things down or cared enough to acknowledge them as having some sort of value. Maybe the value in writing it down isn't for the future as much as it is for the present. For the last 85 years, people have sent ice cream socials into the newspaper. I don't know that that's so much for the future as it is for the people right then feeling like the things that they're doing have some sort of value. Nothing really exists in a vacuum. And I tend to really like things that have a very place-specific feel to them. I think that was what made me really interested in coming back to South Dakota to begin with. A lot of places aren't very good at remembering what makes them interesting. As many opportunities as we get to kind of hang on to those few things that are still around, I think that's probably positive, probably good. I don't want to charm it up too much, but people still give directions, not even in blocks, but based on psychic geography from 30 years ago, turn at you know, the Schaus house. Well, like Dr. Schaus has been dead since, 75. So you have to like have a really kind of deep knowledge of your town history in order to get around. So, I mean, full disclosure, I don't know how much longer I can stick around. It's very, very difficult to support yourself. I'm involved with the state. I work with the state. There will be a point where it will be unsustainable to be here. You'd have to go to some place like Sioux Falls. But then, like, the situation there is that if all the artists in South Dakota go to Sioux Falls, there's not enough opportunity there to support that large of a community. I think that organizations like ODA, or a small group of people who are working together collaboratively to support one another, will probably be, if there is something that maintains in like the rural spaces of South Dakota, North Dakota, and Minnesota. Because I don't think that institutions are going to be the ones that help us accomplish those things.
Is there anything you can say about the Corn Palace?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it in terms of the Grain Palace. This is a poser. I'm gonna make sure I throw that in the ground before we're done. It's fascinating to me to think about how promotion of community has always been a core part of this type of an exercise, but like we've taken that to a bit of an extreme. I don't see it as being out of place, and it's certainly, I think some people, and maybe it's because I don't live in Mitchell, I don't find it embarrassing. I think it's still an incredible exercise in creativity. Yeah, I think it's easy now to dismiss as this really corporate or commercial thing, but at some point a bunch of farmers had to decide it made sense to celebrate what they were doing and celebrate their harvest and do it in a way that was artistic and respectful. And I just can't believe that this is the world's only Corn Palace. It feels like there should be many, many more, right? Corny and I have something in common, Kylie. We're both a little husky.
That was good.
Wow, they all look like they're in a... This is a hostage video. So I am going to check in with one of our ODA builders. Chad Ziemendorf is an interesting case because he is originally a native of the Bay Area. He's a fantastic architectural photographer and chose to move to Western North Dakota to tell the stories of the cultural transformation that was occurring through the oil boom and oil pause and everything that comes after it. His wife is originally from that area, and he brings this incredible energy. He's a former minor league baseball player, so he's hyper competitive, extremely passionate, and I think represents the best of what it looks like to have new ideas and new people join us in the region.
It felt like home immediately, and honestly, Hugh, when we would come visit as a family for holidays or for summer, my blood pressure would go down immediately when I got off the plane. So to be here permanently now and travel periodically to other places instead of traveling periodically here is a treat.
Did the ODA Builders, did that program, did that work, did that matter to your work? Do you think there are lasting impacts to that?
It's going to be a part of my identity moving forward. And how it really helped me accelerate my career was knowing that there was someone else in another corner of the ODA region grinding it out and breaking through barriers was encouraging to me to break through my own barriers, for sure.
It is so humbling to see all these extraordinary people that are somehow loosely tied by this crazy adventure that has been ODA.
I don't mean to use a word that's overused, but it's inspirational to have you as a friend, because your vision and your imagination is bigger than I think what the ODA region can handle, and as a result it encourages us to dream past the borders of the ODA region as well. So thanks for pushing it as hard as you did, because it was not unnoticed. It wasn't taken for granted, and we are all better because of what you did.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Yep, take care.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I was there as a member of staff, 2005, down in the front. It's kind of crazy to watch it. It's kind of 8-year-old Hughes Super Bowl. I started writing inaugural speeches when I was like 13 because it's a good place to start. You should really get started early on that stuff. Don't wait until the week of the inauguration. This is what we do. That's what we do as Americans, is this transfer. But man, it's jarring. It's a reality star move. He found out how to use the nuclear warheads of the country this morning. There's no way a rational human being doesn't have a shortness of breath and all of that. He also, if he was a rational human being, knows that over half of America is disappointed by this. I want him to succeed, because if he doesn't succeed, we don't succeed. But I judge people by their actions, and his actions even recently, even this week, have not been of a humble servant leader.
And will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend. Preserve, protect, and defend. The Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States. So help me God. So help me God. Congratulations, Mr. President. January 20th, 2017 will be remembered as the day the people became the rulers of this nation again. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
The line that I thought was interesting was that, I'm paraphrasing, but that patriotism is the antithetical to prejudice. That somehow that through unquestioning loyalty to country, we overcome racism, sexism, homophobia, and I want him to talk like Tyler Reed and Cheryl Carey, and I want him to talk bigger, and it just feels really small. I think we just got to get back to work. In 2004, I found myself on the White House lawn with my father. It was the president's birthday party and the 4th of July at the White House. It doesn't get any better. And I was sitting on a blanket with my dad, a small town electrician from Millbank, South Dakota. And I remember just thinking, this is everything that 20 years ago as an 8-year-old that I was building. This is very specifically the dream. And I've never felt more alone and never felt more unfulfilled. As part of spending through the campaigns, I was in and around millions and millions and millions of dollars, and I couldn't think of one place that I'd made better. And I looked at my dad, and I don't know how much he made. He had 4 kids and was an electrician. I can't imagine that there was a lot of money there, but I can point to things today, 20 some years later in my hometown, that my dad made better. And that's to me where it started. That's to me where the process of searching for community and searching for connection and searching for creativity all began. I mean, it took years to get there, but that's where it started.
Set up. Check, 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 check. You want to just try that? Just 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Check. That's great. Test.
I'm Rod Arnold. I have spent a lot of my years working inside nonprofits, most notably at Charity Water in New York, where I was COO. I got to know Hugh when I was at Charity Water in New York, and he found me and invited me to speak at ODA on behalf of Charity Water, and found out that I had a South Dakota connection. And so we really hit it off, and that was shortly before I ended up leaving Charity Water, moving back here.
You are from South Dakota.
Mhm.
You grew up here. You were away. You were back here. You're away.
I'm back here some. So I wanted to experience a bigger part of the world, but I always felt drawn to come back. You know, it's really weird. Whenever I remember being away, living in the South in different places, and coming back just for a visit, and feeling like the air was cleaner and purer, and there was like I could breathe in the open sky, and there was definitely something kind of in the air when I would come back home. If we really get through our kind of past our ego and past our sort of prejudices and whatever else, that we can really feel that we're all the same, and we all have this life force that's, you call it God, but I believe that it's in all of us. I think creatives get that more than anybody.
In general, I think you've played a key role in not only what ODA was, but perhaps what the Potluck Society is becoming, and the work with leading good and all those conversations. So I appreciate it a great deal.
Well, I'd like to, before I stop here, I'd like to thank you for the investment you've made in this region, in the creative class of this region. And not only that, like I talk to people all over the country who have been a part of ODA, who still talk about it. Like I was talking to a very prominent individual yesterday based in New York, who was talking about how much he loved ODA and sorry he couldn't get back again last year. And so I think that you've made an impact on this region, but you've really shown the rest of the country and people around the world what's possible in this region. I think it's opened a lot of eyes, and so thank you.
I'll take it.
We're headed over early this morning to sit down and spend some time with Zach DeBoer and Molly O'Connor, husband and wife, dynamic duo of creativity in Sioux Falls. Zach was one of our ODA builders. He is an expert in the intervention of art in community and community engagement. And Molly is a graphic designer that is one of the most generous people with her time and talent that I know. I had the good fortune of working with Molly on the design of some of our events, the stage design and set design and promotional design. She sat on the committee to establish a suitable flying banner for the city of Sioux Falls with me. And Zach has been kind of the grassroots support to get this delightful flag to be the official flag of the city of Sioux Falls. I was coming off the back end of political work, and I ran the mayor's re-election race here in Sioux Falls in April of '06 and had met Amy in that window of time. So we got engaged and I never left. What was the address that you said? This is it right here. Welcome to the casa of Zach and Molly. We lived a block up and a block over for the first 8 years we were in town. So prompt.
Hey.
Hello.
We saw you wandering up. How's it going?
I brought your newspaper.
Oh, thank you.
This is one of the set pieces from Oda Bismarck that Molly designed.
She did all the stage design for that event, and this was a piece that survived.
I had drawn the trolley. We have a trolley downtown and it's kind of struggling to function right now, so I was excited about it because I thought it might give it some exposure. And I did it in this like thick line style, and he purchased the piece and then he said, "Can you design for Oda in that style?" And he goes, "How about we make set pieces, like blow these characters up huge and put them on the stage?" And it was really cool. It was really interesting to be able to see it like that, because it's not often you get to see your work life size. That was kind of the jumping off point for a lot of the projects I've done.
I like working with kids and I like teaching. There's a lot of parts about teaching I didn't like,
being the part-time art teacher, it kind of puts you at the bottom of the totem pole as far as what you need. After my first year, I lost my classroom because they were expanding, so a math teacher got my room and I was put on a cart. Art on a cart. It's
Math
just
on
like,
a cart doesn't sound as good.
no, it doesn't rhyme. And no teacher likes it when the art teacher comes into their room and makes a mess. And so yeah, I did that for a year and then I didn't want to do that anymore. I opened Exposure the same summer I stopped teaching. There wasn't a gallery that was just an art gallery. We had a lot of and galleries. You know, it's a coffee shop and gallery, it's a frame store and gallery, which are great and important to have, but we didn't have one that was just a gallery for a gallery's sake. We had a big opening event on that August 1st Friday. I basically just contacted all the artists I know, just asked for one piece. It was a nice show. We had a massive turnout. Exposure does not make any money.
It's not a nonprofit, but there's
it doesn't
no
make a
profit.
profit. Before it was Exposure, I was going to call it the break-even gallery because I just wanted to have a gallery. I wanted to have a gallery and I wanted people to appreciate art and come and be together and have that experience.
I would rent a space from the Exposure Gallery.
Hey, here's the Jamestown Buffalo. It's designed by Miss Molly O'Connor. This is where we cut the letters out for the chimeric stone in Millbank. When he came to South Dakota, Aaron Draplin did a South Dakota print and included Oda. This is something we did in 2014 that was the network from that year. So each dot represents a community that sent a speaker, an attendee, or a participant in one way or another to Oda events that year. And this is now Potluck Society's recording studio. Not necessarily optimal for sound, but works out pretty well.
I was born in the southwest region of Somalia, and then my family became refugees in Kenya, and then my family got sponsored to come to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So I actually grew up in Cedar Rapids from age 10 to 18, and then moved here. How are you?
I'm well.
Yeah?
I'm well.
Good.
It has been an adventure. We've been on the road recording people all over the region. And yourself?
I'm well, thank you. Very, very well.
Work continues?
Work has to continue. Yeah, work is good. I do many things, but I think I would describe myself as a community advocate and an activist, and I do that in many of the hats that I wear. My 9-to-5 job is Communications and Program Associate with the Legal Rights Center. Outside of that, I do community engagement consulting. I sit on the Met Council's Equity Advisory Committee. The space we're using right now is a space that I use for my anti-CVE coalition work. That's something that I do, after my 9-to-5. ODA was a great chance for me to think about community building in our region, so not just in the Twin Cities, area. And I'm here today to talk to you about a widespread issue affecting our community or our region, and that issue is sex trafficking. I'm here because I know that collectively we can end sex trafficking in our region. My ODA Builder project is to connect regional changemakers like yourselves against sex trafficking. ODA gave me the exposure that I really needed and the push that I needed. Many of us mistakenly dismiss sex trafficking as an international issue, something that's happening over there in Asia, Europe, or Africa. We feel disconnected from it, and I thought this too until I made it the focus of my policy and human rights studies at the University of Minnesota. And afterwards, I actually had foundations and other folks coming up to me in wanting to partner. We can end sex trafficking in our region, but it will need an inclusive and a regional approach. Thank you for listening. This is not like a short-term program or a project. It's gonna take a lot of work, and it's gonna be for many years, and that's okay.
What's the vibe? What's the atmosphere like in Minneapolis right now, this week and in the last couple months?
It's been tough, I think, just like in many parts of the country. I mean, there have been protests here, but I think people are learning we can create alternative systems, and I'm surrounded by people who every day are trying to imagine a different world. And I'm gonna keep myself busy by organizing and thinking of a different world.
That energy you feel, that's potluck energy. That's potluck energy. We're getting ready for the very first meeting of the Potluck Society. We're going to eat food and just be around really great people. And it'll be part of the content we create for the Potluck Society as a podcast and a radio program. And the Potluck Society simply is the next chapter of the work we've done. So my lovely wife Amy, if you haven't met her, when we started out this adventure, there was kind of a simple though deeply complex belief that if we looked at the numbers with 4 million people in the region, there were 1,500 that were world class. And that if we could find them and attract them to the same space to get to know each other, if we could celebrate them and see them collaborate, that things could transform the region dramatically. For me, I believe that we've found many of those 1,500 incredible, talented, creative, community-focused people. And I want to have a series of potlucks with them. I want to spend the next decade talking to them over dinner and sharing some of the stories that I hope to explore through public radio. So an episode that we're working on is on the idea of connection. And so we had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. James Fowler. Fowler's research focuses on this idea that you don't only influence your friends, those kind of intimate connections that you have, friends and family. You don't only influence your friends' friends, but your friends' friends' friends. And if you do some basic math around this idea, if we all have roughly 120 people that we know them well, we know their flaws and foibles and birthdays often, that those ripples are well over 1 million people, which in this region is literally everyone. Thinking about that in terms of network, one of the things that I really want to create as an expectation of these conversations is that you bring an idea to pass. And so I'd love to just talk a little bit about ideas or people that you're particularly interested in right now.
Social media has been on my mind a lot lately, and I'm constantly thinking about its effects on me and my family and how it's persuading us. And I don't know how we get away from that grip that it has on us, and we just are so fixated on what people are thinking.
We as humans are not equipped at all to deal with this, right? We're equipped to deal with this. Sitting down, looking at my face, eating, and then talking. Usually at this time of day, which is exactly the time when we would be doing it, historically or evolutionarily, is around a campfire and hanging out, talking about the day or what's next or telling stories. But the idea when you can have 1,000 or 100,000 followers or people that you theoretically could be interacting with, it's just, we're not built for it at all. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where a lot of kind of the dissonance comes, or the anxiety of like, this is changing my life and I don't know what I'm doing.
Because it is changing our
100%.
emotions. This is what I crave, this.
Within my office alone, the last couple weeks, I've just noticed everyone is overwhelmed. Everyone is anxious. That anxiety is really setting in. And I do think it has part of social media. It's like, you can't do everything. You feel like you're connected to everyone all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's so tiresome.
All I'm seeing is just like, this person was complaining about the Women's March rally and saying it's pointless. And so I'm just like, garbage person.
Yep, judge them.
Terrible, forever.
I guess my question is, why do we presume that that's superficial? How is that any less real than anything else? Like, wouldn't
or is
it be
hyper real?
Wouldn't be, right. Like what we're seeing of this person, if they're complaining about the Women's March or whatever, is like this, hyper real, this incredibly pushed version of themselves.
Yeah,
right?
because would they say the things that they say online to someone's face? And I feel like no.
In a public speech.
But that's who they are. But that's like a peek behind the curtain of who those people are.
Yeah, I think right on that conversation.
You guys are awesome. I think there's a topic there. Let me just do something so I've got it in the context of this. And the noisier you can be, the better, because then it will be able to be used whenever. So move and shift. Hi, I'm Hugh Weber. Welcome to the Potluck Society. Hi, I'm Hugh Weber. Welcome to the Potluck Society. You guys are ridiculous. You guys are awesome.
I'd like to believe that the work that I'm doing and the work that others around me are doing is fundamentally changing the DNA of this region and has the potential to change the DNA of rural creativity. That's not something that my kids get to point at. Like, that's not something that my grandkids get to point at, but it'll be better for them. That legacy will leave them with a better place, and that is extremely exciting. And I get to tell a whole bunch of really great stories between now and then.
To quote from the great Odin philosopher, Dan Wilson of Semisonic, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end.
You started here on this journey with the wrapping up of ODA here in Millbank, and I think it's perfect that you end here, and it's perfect that we end on this north end of Main Street, because it really amplifies the fact that the work of ODA is not done. All of us that were able to take a spark from Hugh and the flame that was ODA will carry that home. My dream is to turn this into a farmer's market, and it's a perfect intersection between what wasn't a community and what can be, because over there behind is the old base for the grist mill. And the grist mill was the original mill so that the farmers had a place to bring their grain to market. Wish the sun were shining. And so our plan is to put up arbors on this side and on the far side for shade and for a place for people to bring their merchandise to town, and then to tear up this ugly parking lot and put a green space in. Hopefully the farmers market will grow then, and people will see this backdrop and it will draw them into the community. So, you know, it's a dream, but you got to start somewhere.
You want me to read this thing?
Yeah, let's read it. You can just sit there, that's fine. Tell me what you're reading first, though.
In the 1920s and 30s, Doane Robinson was made the very first historian of the state of South Dakota. He would be a leader that would push forward the idea of the cultural heritage of the region as being distinct. And he would ultimately be the person that spearheaded everything with Mount Rushmore and so much of our development as a state. But he sat down at some point in the late 1920s and was already pushing things so aggressively that this region mattered and had an identity and a clarity around it that he produced the Doane Robinson's Encyclopedia of South Dakota. He may have had a little bit more of an ego as it came to legacy. He covers so many things, from intercollegiate sports in the 1920s to the controversy over Sacagawea's burial. But the thing I love perhaps most about this is the dedication he offers at the beginning. Dedication. South Dakota, my South Dakota, for half a century my homeland. I have loved you as a father loves his own. Your abounding plains, your mighty rivers, your glorious mountains, and your purling brooks are all mine. The flowers bloom on the prairies and perfume the summer breezes for me. The spicy breath of your forest is for my benediction. From your infancy, I have adored you. I was present when the territorial chrysalis was broken. It was my privilege to assist at the induction of the young state. All the way, it has been my joy to serve you. With pride, I have observed every step in your progress. With zeal, I have sought to crown you with garlands more beautiful than those adorning other commonwealth. With fervor, I have prayed that your future may be great, noble, and beautiful. My South Dakota, as the end approaches, before my ashes are committed to the kindly protection of your clay, I am hoping with a mighty hope that I may in some way be helpful in bringing to you the good distinction of your high merit. To you, my South Dakota, I dedicate my humble work. Awesome. just awesome.